they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face. So, and I'm encouraging every other province to do the same. Quebec, Manitoba, BC, we all have to act in unison. Out east, they rely on our energy. They need to feel the pain. They want to come at us hard, we're going to come back twice. We're unlike any other country. You know, we have 41 million people, but we're powerful. We're powerful on energy. We're powerful on nuclear energy, on oil, on goods going back and forth across the border.
Well, what you saw there were just a few fragments of Doug Ford's interview from a few hours ago, yesterday. But this is just the beginning. Of course, we have the most relevant parts of the interview, and what he said is shocking. Doug Ford, who is equivalent to what would be the governor of the state of Ontario, although here he is the mayor of the province of Ontario. The states are called provinces. The governors are called mayors, but it would be equivalent to a governor, as Doug Ford has just announced a nuclear response against the United States. Be careful, don't get confused. It's not about a nuclear bomb. It's about cutting off all the nuclear energy that the United States receives from much of the northern part of the country, which, in case anyone didn't know, and we will be analyzing in detail, comes from Canada. And with this threat of cutting off nuclear energy, a large part of the United States will be plunged into darkness and come to a standstill. And look, I'm not exaggerating when I say that even the global market, the stock exchanges, will collapse. Because guess where Wall Street operates? Now imagine, Wall Street, without electricity, not even to turn on a light bulb. This is not a metaphor. I'm literally talking about Ontario having the power to leave New York. Several states in North America in total darkness. Canada can paralyze its economy, throw them into an energy chaos, and the one who holds the key to do this is precisely Ontario. And the person representing Ontario is the gentleman you see there, Doug Ford, who was very clear in his warnings. It's the final warning, and forewarned is forearmed. This is not something that, says Doug Ford, it wasn't something we started. It wasn't a Canadian idea. It wasn't a Mexican idea. It was Donald Trump who wanted to play with fire. It was Donald Trump who wanted these consequences, and now he's going to get what he deserves. He was the one who threw the first punch. He already said that the tariffs start today. Well, let him face the consequences. Because he thought Canada would sit back silent like other times, but this time he was wrong. What Doug Ford just said is possibly, friends, the most powerful economic attack, the most decisive that Canada has launched against the United States since this country was founded. We're not just talking about speeches, bravado, or press conferences. We are talking about immediate direct measures with devastating consequences, especially for the U.S. economy, which is going to fall. Look, let's see what Doug Ford said. And now I'll show you the consequences of each of these on the U.S. markets, which are about to see their end if this comes to pass.
I said, number one, I don't start a tariff war, but we're going to win this tariff war. Right off the hop, I've directed the LCBO, we're the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world, to remove every bit of U.S. alcohol off the shelves. I know my good friend, the governor of Kentucky, he's losing his mind right now. I said, you better talk to your president. Mitch McConnell, senior senator from Kentucky, they're losing their mind. We purchased over $1 billion of alcohol, 3,600 products, 35 states. It's going to hit them. We call them the kitchen table issues. Then we're going to cancel Starlinks right away from Elon Musk. Not that $100 million makes a difference for him, but it's principle. I've directed the procurement of over $30 billion of goods, not to go to the U.S., to make sure we buy Ontario first. And if we can't find it in Ontario and we can't build it in Ontario, we go across the country. I'm asking politely, until I implement it, every retail store When you go look at the shelf talker that has the price, we need to see a Canadian flag on that price. A lot of people can't pick it up and scan it. So please work with us or we're gonna legislate it. I'll tell you this, uranium for the US comes from Saskatchewan. I've had deep conversations with my good friend, closest ally, Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan. That uranium goes over to Port Hope, Ontario to get processed. From Port Hope, it goes down to get enriched, down to the US. I will not and cannot speak for Scott Moe. He's a patriot, he loves Canada, but if we got to stockpile our high-grade nickel here in Ontario and sell it to the world, so be it. And as for uranium, I'll leave that up to Scott to decide. The potash that fertilizes all their farming communities. As President Trump is going after our dairy farmers, we're sending them fertilizer, 87% of it is going to the US. And yeah, can they try to get potash everywhere else? They can, but they can't get it up the Mississippi River. So they're stuck with Canadian potash. Can they get uranium? Yeah, if they want to cozy up to Russia, which I see President Trump doing, you can try to get uranium there. But why would you do that? We want to ship more uranium, more potash, more nickel, more energy, and build an AMCAN fortress. I can't for the life of me figure out why this guy's attacking his closest neighbors, allies, and friend. A tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. And I'm going to repeat that on NBC, CNN, Fox News, CNBC. I'm going to be hammering the airwaves to get that message to the Americans. They're going to get hurt. It's the wrong decision. But if they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face. So, and I'm encouraging every other province to do the same. Quebec, Manitoba, BC, we all have to act in unison. Out east, they rely on our energy. They need to feel the pain. They want to come at us hard, we're going to come back twice as hard.
About the Starlink deal, why not cancel that right now? Given what the president, the display in the Oval Office, you've been a strong supporter of Ukraine. We know that Starlink, there's been a problem with Starlink in Ukraine, and Mr. Musk, why not send a message right now to the Ukrainian people and to people in Canada and say this deal is done, we're not doing business with this guy?
I'm not going to start a tariff war. I'm not going to be the one that pokes the line, per se. But I can assure you, he comes at us, he's going to get a rude awakening. We're unlike any other country. You know, we have 41 million people, but we're powerful. We're powerful on energy. We're powerful on nuclear energy, on oil, on goods going back and forth across the border. We buy more off the United States than any other government in the world. And I always say, President Trump.
There you have it. What happens when you mess with and exhaust Canada's patience? The President Claudia Sheinbaum is just on her way. Wait a few hours. He should already be at the morning briefing, starting with Plan B. But for now, this blow that Canada just announced is not something Donald Trump will shake off. He has no other path but to fall. Look, he has no choice. They are going to collapse. If this happens, it's the end for electricity. Because that's what hurts the most. Did you know that more than 60% of the electricity consumed by New York? New York, by the way, is the economic capital of the world. Well, everything that lights up New York comes from Canada, comes from Ontario, from Quebec, which generate enough hydroelectric and especially nuclear energy, hydroelectric and nuclear, to supply millions of American homes, and in fact they do, to put it in numbers. Just Ontario, this province where I live, exports more than 20 terawatts per year to the North American market, to the United States. That is equivalent, friends, to a total annual electricity output of entire countries. In other words, it's like we're talking about fully lighting up Denmark or Ireland. Now imagine what will happen when Doug Ford, because he says he won't hesitate to do it, and there's a big difference between Doug Ford and Donald Trump. Donald Trump talks just to talk. He talks because he has a mouth. Doug Ford never makes these kinds of threats lightly. In fact, he had never been seen at this level. But he simply ran out of patience. And if Doug Ford, here in Ontario, flips the switch on the United States, it will be absolute chaos. And if a MAGA supporter, pro-Trump, comes here wanting to tell me it's not true, well, I'm going to give you some facts to show you how they're going to collapse. Because Ford says he's willing to cut off the power supply to the United States, and he says he'll do it with a smile on his face. That he will laugh out loud seeing how they pay the consequences, and you know what? So will I. Because they are going to get what they deserve. Break time, it's something Trump brought upon himself. Break time, not something we provoked. This is the first time, in fact, that a Canadian leader has issued such a threat. Break time, the friendship is over. Canadian patience is over. The courtesies with Donald Trump are over. This is not just any politician speaking. I mean, it would still be relevant if, for example, an MP, a parliamentarian, a deputy were to say it. It's being said by someone who would be the equivalent of the governor of the state of Ontario, which is the largest in the province. The province that, by the way, for those who don't know, and hence the title, because Ontario has the province, it is the province that controls the largest nuclear reactor on planet Earth, Bruce. That Bruce reactor alone is the largest nuclear complex in the world. To give you an idea of how powerful it is, a single reactor in Ontario, just one, generates more energy than many entire nations. Bruce has a generation capacity, as I mentioned earlier, of 6,550 megawatts. That's enough to supply up to 6 million homes. If Ontario cuts off this energy flow, tens of millions of people in the United States will be left completely in the dark, back to the Stone Age, in a matter of a second. Now let's talk numbers. Ontario exports more than 20 terawatt hours, as I mentioned, per hour of electricity to the United States every year. That is the equivalent, friends, to the total electricity consumption of entire countries. And all the energy that Canada is selling to the United States is not a luxury. It's not that Donald Trump says he doesn't need Canada, that he buys from us because he wants to do us a favor. No. He doesn't buy electricity from Canada to do this country a favor. It's a vital necessity he has for his industry, for his commerce, for his everyday life. New York, and a large part of the entire northwest of the United States depends 60% on Canadian electricity. There is no plan B. I'm referring to Donald Trump. Claudia Sheinbaum does have one. But Donald Trump doesn't have a plan B for this. He doesn't have an alternative source that can replace that amount of energy overnight. There is no nuclear plant on that side of the United States that can replace Canada. If Canada flips the switch off, the United States will face an immediate energy collapse. And this idea of plunging the United States into total darkness in the northern part of the country, well, it's not an exaggeration. It's a massive blackout that will be seen throughout the entire northeastern region, and that will mean people will be left without power. It will mean that American factories in those areas will cease operations. They won't make money. The New York subway will come to a standstill. Emergency hospitals, etc., also rely on those generators that only last a few hours. So imagine the scenario where American hospitals are plunged into darkness. Because of Donald Trump, not Ontario, where emergency rooms can't keep the lights on. That is not an act of sabotage. This is a direct consequence of what Donald Trump is bringing upon himself. Imagine Wall Street, which is right here, in this area of the United States, being in a blackout. We're talking about the largest stock exchange in the world, and imagine it stops operating because its servers don't have enough backup. The global economy will enter a crisis in a matter of minutes. That is the true power of Ontario. On a normal day, to get an idea, Wall Street moves more than in one day, in transactions, a blackout of about 24 hours in New York, it will cost the United States over LN million on millions of dollars in losses. What is Donald Trump talking about when he says he doesn't need Canada? Then what if that blackout extends to the industrial level? The factories in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania will come to a standstill. Imagine, Ontario doesn't even need to switch off the United States for 24 hours. With just 1 hour, it plunges it into chaos. Detroit, for example, the heart of the American automotive industry, will fall into collapse. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, all of them, which in some way, let's say, depend on the cheap energy flowing from Ontario to operate their production lines. A power outage like that, my friends, will mean losses of hundreds of millions of dollars for each day of production. Moreover, for every hour. Not to mention the massive unemployment that will be generated, right? Which will not be insignificant. Now, think of something even more extreme. The defense and communication systems of the United States also depend on that electrical supply from Canada. A massive blackout like that will affect US military facilities. It will affect their radars, their monitoring systems, the government data servers. The national security of the United States will be severely compromised. The political impact of this would be devastating. And we only talked about the first one, the energy issue. We haven't even discussed the rest of what Doug Ford has said is coming down on the United States if Trump continues on his current path. Trump built this image around the idea that he is a relentless negotiator. But what happens when his policies leave his country in total darkness? Imagine those images. The streets of New York, currently lit up, operating with emergency lights, and after a while, total darkness. Crime returning to the streets. Airports closed. Millions of people trapped in airports because they can't take off. They can't operate. Control towers not functioning. Public transportation halted. Hospitals on the brink of collapse. The stock market on hold. Factories closed. Total chaos in the northeastern United States. Is that what Donald Trump wants? Who's holding the reins here? Trump thought he could blackmail Canada. Hold my beer, as they say around here. If Ford keeps its word, the consequences for the United States will be devastating and immediate. There will be paralysis in factories throughout this area. In Michigan, massive company closures, technologies, widespread blackouts that are on the verge of collapse. Extreme temperatures, imagine, without being able to use the heating. We are talking about an immediate humanitarian and economic crisis. I'm not exaggerating. And all this just because Trump believed he could blackmail Canada and thought, because only in his imagination could he believe something like that we are his backyard. And it doesn't stop there. This is just the first threat you saw Doug Ford make. He already said that American products are going out of Ontario. Goodbye. Nothing American fits here. Nothing that comes from the United States. Literally, he said that Ontario will stop acquiring more than the dollars from the dollars in goods coming from the United States. To understand the magnitude of this, thousands of dollars is equivalent to the entire economy of countries like Honduras or Iceland. And this is just Ontario. We haven't added Quebec. We haven't added British Columbia, nor have we added other provinces. Because we're talking about over $100 billion annually at stake. That, my friends, in economic terms, well, you can imagine that it's a devastating blow directly to the gross domestic product of the United States. Additionally, Ford also ordered the immediate removal from liquor stores. for those who are not watching us from Canada. These LCBOs are the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, which is the largest alcohol purchaser in the world, controlled by the government. The government is the only entity allowed to sell alcohol in this province. And the stores that sell alcohol are owned by the province, or the province grants concessions. And all American alcohol outside is not welcome. Whiskey, bourbons, everything produced, beers, everything produced in the United States will not be able to be sold in any store in Ontario. Do you know why this is so serious? Someone might say, well, it's alcohol. It's not milk or eggs. Yes, but Ontario represents for places like Kentucky sales of over $650 million a year just in bourbon. Imagine losing that overnight. And believe me, in Kentucky right now, they are in absolute panic because it's a crisis. Immediate impact on their local economy. A state economy that heavily relies on exports to Canada. Now, what's coming could be even more dramatic because, look, Doug Ford is also issuing another key threat. Canadian uranium. Pay attention to this because it's strategic and also critical. Saskatchewan and Ontario, as Doug Ford mentioned, Saskatchewan and Ontario together process almost all of the uranium in the United States. Almost all. And that uranium isn't used for museum displays. It's used to supply nuclear plants in the United States. That's why, I repeat, it's a nuclear threat and another nuclear threat. Because that uranium represents 20% of all their national electricity, plus what they take from Canada because they won't be getting it anymore. Oi, the United States does not produce enough enriched uranium. That is a reality. They have accepted it. They cannot meet their own domestic demand. They depend on more than 90% of foreign uranium. And where does that uranium come from? Well, it mainly comes from Canada. Because relations with other places, like they could get it from other places, like Kazakhstan or Niger, which are somewhat unstable. Besides, it's very far away. It's not the same as bringing it from right next door. Of course, that's why Trump seems to want to have a plan B with Russia to supply the uranium. He will surely get it, not at the price of getting it from next door. Was it close by? Well, no. It's another tool in this trade war. One more potassium. The potassium used for agricultural fertilizers. The potassium consumed by American farmers comes directly from Canada. To be more precise, it comes from Saskatchewan. And that potassium is so strategic, my friends, that without it, American agriculture literally collapses. And on top of that, they're driving away the immigrants who cultivate those fields. Without potassium and without immigrants. Everything the United States grows, especially wheat, corn, soy, will immediately collapse. In the next harvest, forget it. American agriculture collapses. And what's going to happen? What it will lead to is a spike in domestic prices of all basic foodstuffs. As it is, inflation in the United States is already delivering its first blows. Go shopping at the supermarket in the United States and tell me if you see the same prices as 3 or 4 months ago. But all this is going to cause food inflation. It will further destabilize their economy. Well, to top it off, Ford is also announcing the immediate cancellation of strategic contracts with Starlink, which is owned by Elon Musk. In other words, the message is clear: nothing that smells of the United States, and especially nothing that smells of Donald Trump and his allies. Elon Musk? Well, this is a symbolic message. Doug Ford himself says it. I know it's not like we're going to bankrupt him, but it's on principle. And it's also a way of saying, in Canada, you're not going to make a dollar. You're not going to do business here. Though, by the way, Elon Musk holds Canadian citizenship, and at this moment, signatures are being gathered to request the government to revoke his Canadian citizenship. I don't know if he cares about it, but what I do know is that he doesn't deserve to have it. It's not just about money. Musk is a traitorous type, even to the countries to which he holds nationality. Elon Musk's nationality is money. And that, of course, knows no borders, but neither does it know loyalties. In this Starlink issue, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. And well, what Doug Ford is saying is sending a very strong message to Donald Trump's allies, Donald Trump. And what Ford is announcing is also, let's say, a direct call for the rest of the Canadian provinces to react. Next is Canada then. Quebec, Manitoba, British Columbia, Alberta, all the provinces that in some way have their own economic weapons against the United States, especially in matters of energy resources like natural gas, oil, critical minerals. And if we combine this with a potential similar response, which will surely come in a few hours from Mexico through Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico, which is a strategic partner with whom the United States has, just imagine, more than $850 billion in annual trade, we would be facing an unprecedented economic collapse for the United States. Trump thought he could abuse. He thought he could humiliate his neighbors without consequences. He wanted to do it with Mexico, now he wanted to do it with Canada. But this is not 1994. We are not his backyards. We are trade partners who can sink him. Because this is a two-way game. If he thinks he can hit us, we can hit him too, and together, Mexico and Canada. We can hit him harder. The world has changed. Trump chose to ignore that reality, not us. For more than 2,500 years, a zoo, in this book of the art of war, wrote that wars are won before they are fought. Well, let me tell you something. Trump lost this battle when he decided to attack Canada and Mexico without realizing that the response would be much more forceful and coordinated than he ever imagined. And now, he will have to face the consequences, which are economic but also political, due to his irresponsible decisions. The United States at this moment, I don't know if he knows it, but it's on the brink of a precipice. Of course, Wall Street knows it. Last night we mentioned how the Dow Jones fell 449 points. It's an incredible marker. Standard & Poor's too. They were the ones who struck the first blow, the first step towards that abyss. And now they have to face the consequences. And we, as Doug Ford says with a smile on our faces, will watch them fall. It's that simple. Thank you very much, friends, for joining our first streaming, and we'll see you in the next one.